Hi YouTube, it's Dawn, and I had actually promised you guys a live stream in yesterday's video. I was going to do a live stream this evening. Unfortunately, I've never done live streams on YouTube before, so I did not realize that you actually had to activate your account in order to have access to live streams. So I'm currently going through that process, and next week I will be doing the live streams for sure. But tonight I really wanted to get a video out for you guys so you at least had a taste of what live streams would look like. Essentially, yesterday I went over the case of the Marion County Jane Doe, also known as Mark Twain Jane Doe, where we talked about a young woman whose body was found south of Hannibal, Missouri. Earlier that week, she had been seen with two unidentified individuals. She had passed away due to asphyxiation. She was found in 2015, and she has been unidentified since then. The two individuals she was with have also been unidentified since then. So since we went over the basics in the last video, tonight's video, which should have been a live stream but is not, I wanted to have a discussion with you guys talking about all of the unanswered questions that came to my mind, all of the speculations and just general uncertainties that I found while I was researching. And during the live stream, I would hope that you guys would chime in with your own comments and your own questions so we could have that discussion back and forth. But unfortunately, I was unable to do a live stream this evening. So we're just going to be doing this sit down and chat video. I do have a list of questions. There's no way I could have remembered all of these questions verbatim. So I do have them written down, and I will be glancing down at my paper to read them as this video goes on. Again, I would hope during an actual live stream that we would be having a discussion back and forth, talking about these sorts of things. But because that's not the case, and I still wanted to get a video out for you guys tonight, I went ahead and just sat down and talked about my own questions. So that is what we are going to do now. The first thing I wanted to discuss in this case, and I think the thing that so many people are going to gravitate towards, are the two unidentified individuals with our Jane Doe. She was seen 7 days before her body was found. She was seen in a Mark Twain gift shop in a Mark Twain cave with two people who have yet to be identified. So I have so many questions regarding these people. The first one is, supposedly, with my research, there were two people who definitively saw this Jane Doe. They were two women, and they saw the man and the woman that Jane Doe was with. I have not seen anyone else listed as seeing these other two people. Did anyone, aside from these two women, actually see Jane Doe and the two people she was with? I would assume if the FBI was really pushing this information out there, that other people hopefully would have also seen Jane Doe and those two unidentified individuals. But in my research, all I found was comments from those two women, which leads me immediately to the speculation that potentially those two women would be involved. Obviously, the FBI doesn't think that's the case, so I'm going to go with the professional's opinion on this, that most likely those women were not involved. But if they were the only people to see Jane Doe with that unidentified man and that unidentified woman, isn't that a little curious? It really makes me wonder. I'm hoping that other people also saw them. The second thing, and it's a really big thing, is the woman that Jane Doe was with was listed as blonde, short hair with streaks in her hair. What color were the streaks? I think this is so important. Was it just she had darker or lighter blonde streaks? That would make sense with the minimum information we were given. But if it was colored streaks like brown or black or pink, something that could set her apart even more, I think that's super important, just to specify what color streaks she had in her hair. That could definitely help jog someone's memory, especially if she had blonde hair with brown streaks and someone thinks back to someone they knew at that time who had that hairstyle. And then we move on to the orange Iowa Rodeo t-shirt. Was there any more information on that t-shirt? I'm sure that the information that was given out to the public is all that they had. It was an orange Iowa Rodeo t-shirt. I would love to see a picture or surveillance or something that shows that t-shirt, because as you guys know, I looked into the research. I could not find an Iowa rodeo, just plain Iowa rodeo. So I'd assume that it has to be a smaller rodeo within Iowa, which could really limit it down to someone who purchased one of those t-shirts. Maybe they have a catalog of the people who purchased those t-shirts at that time, receipts from that time, with names, credit cards of an orange rodeo t-shirt. I feel like that would be a great route for investigators to take. Maybe it could identify a hometown. You know, how many people are traveling out of their way to go to a small local rodeo in Iowa? Probably just people from the immediate area or someone participating in the rodeo. Or my biggest thing is, what if it is a t-shirt from the Iowa Cowboys Association? What is it actually called? Iowa Rodeo Cowboys Association. That has Iowa Rodeo right there. So if they saw the word Iowa Rodeo, that makes sense. I would like to, and I really should do this, contact the Iowa Rodeo Cowboys Association and just see if they sold an orange shirt within 5 years before this happened. Maybe their annual shirt fundraiser they did that year or the year prior happened to have an orange shirt, and that could really help limit this down, because I'm guessing the only people who would own that shirt are people who are members of that association, and that would limit it down to, now we have to take those members, find someone who is 6'6" tall, blonde, and the approximate age that was seen with Jane Doe at that time. Which leads me to the next thing. Did they ever specify the age of the man? I could not find that in my research. They specified the woman was between 18 and 22. I didn't see anything about the age of the man. So we don't know how old that guy was that she was with. Which leads me to the next thing. Because they couldn't specify the age of the man and they just specified the age of the woman, could Jane Doe and the man have been in a relationship? Were they acting like a couple? Were the other two acting like a couple? They've listed the other two as a couple. They've kind of described them as that. But I don't know if they mean they were just a couple of people that were with Jane Doe, or they were actually like a romantically involved couple that seemed together, held hands, you know, had some form of PDA that really separated them from Jane Doe. I'd be really curious to know if it was definitive that those two people were a couple, or just a couple of people with Jane Doe. And if they were just a couple of people, that opens up so many possibilities. Was he at the age that it would have made sense for him to be romantically involved with Jane Doe, who was approximately 39 at the time of her passing? Also, if they were both younger but didn't really seem romantically involved, could they have been nieces of Jane Doe? Could they have been children, stepchildren, some kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but just like a child of Jane Doe, a relative of Jane Doe, even maybe students of Jane Doe that she happened to be going on a tour with? Like, there are so many possibilities if those two people weren't romantically involved. If they were romantically involved, what were two younger individuals doing walking around with a 39-year-old woman? Two people in their young 20s going on tours with, you know, someone near 40. It seems like almost like a parent-child relationship when you put that far of an age range between them. But then it also brings me to the next question, which I think I'm actually going to discuss a little later, so I'll save that. But there's just so many possibilities for what those two people could have been and their relationship to Jane Doe. I would really like to know if they were romantically involved. My cat's tail is about to flip in front of the camera. There we go. Lovely. That's part of filming live. If this was live right now, I'd be really embarrassed. But because it's not, I'm not going to edit it out anyways, because this is supposed to kind of be like a dry run for what my live ones will be like. I'm getting sidetracked. We'll continue on. Basically, you know, I would really like to know, did they definitively seem like they were romantically involved? If not, that opens up a lot of possibilities for the relationship that they could have had with Jane Doe. Why were they with Jane Doe? Even if they were romantically involved, then it puts it in my mind that maybe they were a child, a stepchild, a niece, or something of Jane Doe. One of them was, and the other one was dating that one. So maybe the daughter, or the girl was like the daughter of Jane Doe and she had her boyfriend with her, you know, something like that. And that just opens up the possibility for, now my phone is going off, for like genetic links. You know, they have the genes of this Jane Doe. Potentially, you know, if they did get a genetic link to her, through Ancestry.com or something of the like, then they could start linking family members and maybe see if there's anyone in the family tree that looks like her. That could really pan out. So the next thing we'll move on to are the investigators and just the investigation in general and questions that I had regarding that. So actually, my dad brought up a really good point to me about Hannibal, Missouri, is that there is actually a Mark Twain gift shop at the cave, and then there is a separate Mark Twain gift shop in Hannibal. They didn't specify which one of those gift shops were actually where Jane Doe and these two unidentified individuals were seen. So was it the one at the cave, or was it the one, in town? Because if it was just the one at the cave, that would make sense. The two women saw them at this one specific location, shopping in the gift shop and shopping at the cave. Did they check anything nearby though? Because we know even at that cave, there was a campground. Did they interview people who had stayed at the campground? Did they interview people or just check surveillance cameras from all over Hannibal? If they were at the cave, don't you think they probably would have gone into town and seen the other little Mark Twain type tourist attractions that were in that area? Checking surveillance from all of those locations. I'm curious if they checked surveillance from other local places in the area that Jane Doe could have been seen at prior to her passing. Also, the cave, and I brought this up in my original video, is when I go on a lot of, tourist type things, usually like halfway through or near the end or the beginning, they'll do like a photo, like a keepsake photo for you to bring home with you. I'm really curious if the cave did that on those days. How long do they keep those pictures for purchase or whatever? And did they check and see if, Jane Doe or anyone who, looked like the two people she was with was in any of those pictures? That's another thing that I was super curious about. I'm sure they looked into that, but I wonder if they did. My biggest thing is with this investigation, when I was looking up all of my research, the news stories were primarily focused in the area where Hannibal is, which is on the border of Iowa, on the border of Illinois and Missouri. So you had news coverage in southeastern Iowa, you had news coverage in west central Illinois, and you had news coverage in northeast Missouri. And that was it. You did not have news coverage really beyond that point. You didn't have news coverage in northern Illinois, northern Iowa, or southern Missouri, all of the places where people typically travel from to go to Hannibal. And I think if you really want to get this story out there, get a lot of coverage on it, really have people thinking of two people who match the description of the unidentified individuals seen with Jane Doe, you need to get this story to the places where the most common tourists for that area come from, and that's in surrounding areas of Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri. The story needs to go beyond the centralized point where it's stuck right now, which is immediately around Hannibal. The story hasn't gone far beyond that point. I grew up in northern and central Illinois, and I never knew of this Jane Doe. There was a few Jane Does that I had heard of while growing up. This one never came up, and I actually had visited Hannibal as a child and as a teenager, so it hits home with me because I know that area, and it just really makes me wonder why this story wasn't pushed beyond just Hannibal. I know that investigators can do everything in their power to research and everything, but the public can really help. If you can get this story out to people in those areas that could have been at Hannibal that day, who traveled from a few hours away in Illinois, a few hours away in Iowa, or a few hours away in Missouri, you've now captured an audience that truly could help identify those two unidentified individuals that the FBI is really pushing towards as links to this case. So, my third question for investigators, if I ever got the chance to talk to them, would be, did you check into the Iowa Rodeo Cowboys Association, or did you research and find if there were any Iowa rodeos with orange t-shirts that year or previous years, that could have been linked to that unidentified individual. I think that is just a strong route to go down. This far of amount of time later, 5 years, I'm not sure if it's as solid of a route to go down, but at that time it just seems like such a strong route to take, because it's such an identifiable piece of information on that t-shirt that really could have put you on the right path. So I'm curious if they did that, and if not, I'm kind of just curious to do it myself and ask around and possibly, put in that tip if I could, especially with the Iowa Rodeo Cowboys Association. I really, really would like to know if they had an orange t-shirt that they sold in just a few years prior or that year. It's just, I would really like an answer for that. So now let's move on to Jane Doe. And this is a big question for me because she was found with a ring. And to me, that looks like a style of wedding ring. Yeah, maybe costume jewelry. When I was married prior to getting divorced, my wedding ring was costume jewelry. I feel like a lot of people probably have costume jewelry wedding rings, especially with millennials, but that's really beside the point. We're not going to get into that. So I'm wondering what finger was the ring on? Was it on her ring finger? Could it have been kind of a makeshift wedding ring? Which then leads me back to the question of, could she have been romantically involved with the man that she was seen with earlier in Hannibal, Missouri? Second thing is a really big thing for me, and I need to go back to her information. So it says that she was 5'2" to 5'4", 120 to 140 pounds. I'd say that's pretty average weight for those heights in America. I'm 5'6", I'm 150 pounds. So if she was only 120 to 130 pounds at those heights, she was pretty average sized. Yet it says that she is in 13-14 size jeans, which is twice as wide as me, and an XL shirt, which again is like twice as much as me. I'm a medium and I'm a size 8. So like a 7-8. So it just seems like her clothes were so big for her. Did her clothes fit her appropriately? Were they falling off? Did they seem like they'd been put on after her death? I really wonder about that, if the clothes fit her well. And if so, that seems like it would make her more of a curvy individual, which would be something that I feel like is an identifiable feature. A short, curvy Hispanic woman, her face doesn't really depict that. You can't imagine a woman who's shorter and, has wide hips with that face. Her face just makes her look like a slender, average woman, is what I would say. So knowing that piece of information, I feel like could really help identify her better. And if not, and she was put in those clothes afterwards, which I really wonder about, because for her height and weight, I guess I don't know a lot of people who are like 5'2" and 140 pounds, but I feel like those clothes would just be too big, which makes me wonder if she was put in those clothes afterwards. Maybe they stripped her of her clothes and put her in different clothes, kind of hide her identity a little bit, I guess. I don't know. Could her actual clothes have been taken, is like another one of my questions. And then another big thing for me, because clearly 2 people were seen with Jane Doe, and they remembered exactly what those 2 people were wearing. Did they remember what Jane Doe was wearing? She was wearing a colorful striped shirt. She was wearing jeans, which I'm assuming are pants. It doesn't specify if they're pants or shorts. From the picture, I would assume pants. So I feel like on a warm day when the 2 other people were wearing shorts, they would remember that she was wearing pants, and they would remember the colorful striped shirt because they remember the 2 other colorful shirts. So do they remember what Jane Doe was wearing? And if they do, was she wearing the same clothes that she was found in? I just feel like that's really important, because it would indicate that she was probably, her life was taken the same day that they saw her, because she was in the same clothes. Next question I have is, how did they approximate the age of Jane Doe? 39 seems very oddly specific. Typically in Jane Does that I've researched, it's an age range that they believe someone's between. So to kind of pinpoint it at 39 seems really direct and specific. And it kind of, just from a public standpoint, from people like passing by, reading up on that, you know, if she's 5 years different from that, if she's in her mid 40s or her early 30s, there's a lot of people who are going to pass by that and be like, that's not my missing relative or whatever, because this lady is too young or too old to be that, when really she maybe just looks a little older, a little younger. So I feel like, I'm not going to say it was irresponsible for them to put out her age as 39. It just seems very specific, and I wonder how they came to that conclusion and why they didn't give her more of an age range. And then another question I have is, clearly they had the brand for the jeans, but did they have a brand for the shirt? Because clothes can always be linked to a specific place. Certain brands are sold at certain stores are only available in certain parts of the US. It just helps really pinpoint it down to a specific location that she could have purchased that. So I wonder if they have a brand for the shirt, if they even thought of looking into that brand. One thing that I never saw mentioned was, did she have any tattoos, piercings, birthmarks, you know, really identifiable features that would make her easy to recognize? I never saw anything listing that. So I'm curious if she did have any of those features. And they speculated that the ring she was wearing was purchased at the Mark Twain gift shop, but did they actually directly match that ring to a ring sold in the gift shop? If so, I understand why they came to that conclusion. If not, how did they come to that conclusion? Now we'll move on to her death. So one of the questions I have is, which side of the river was she found on? She was found by fishermen. So, you know, the fishermen may have been from Missouri. She may have been found on, you know, hung up on the rocks. Was that on the Missouri side, on the Illinois side, on one of the islands that are in between those? So I'm curious about that. If it was on the Missouri side, that puts her very close to very, I would say, convenient road access to have her body dumped there. On the Illinois side, I didn't see as close of roads to the river. And then of course, if it was an island or something like that, it would make sense with her body kind of drifting down. So I'm just curious where approximately, like, which side of the river was her body found. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it was probably the Missouri side, because, you know, Missouri took up the case. So it was kind of on their land. So I'm going to guess that that's where it was, but I'm just curious. Maybe an island or something. If it was an island, that would make sense of her being dumped off the bridge, because how else would she have landed on an island, or possibly even dumped off a boat? Something of the like. So, which leads me to the next question. Which bridge did they speculate that she may have been dumped off of? And why did they make that speculation? Makes me wonder, you know, was she found in an area that's hard to access? An island, a specific side of the river that would just be really hard to get to? Maybe there's thick brush or trees or something in the way that would make it difficult for someone to dump a body there, to make them think that maybe she was dumped off of a bridge, which then makes me think maybe she was also dumped off of a boat. There are two bridges. There's an interstate bridge and a railroad bridge north of where her body was found. So which bridge did they guess that she was thrown off of? And if it was the interstate bridge, that leads into a whole nother potential group of witnesses. Someone who may have seen just something curious happening on the bridge that day. People parked on the side of the bridge. People walking on the side of the bridge. People just standing on the side of an interstate bridge, like a pretty busy, fast traffic bridge, you know. I feel like that's something people may remember. Next thing I have questions about is, so she had signs of asphyxiation. Basically, her autopsy said her death was from asphyxiation. Again, that's when your mouth and nose are covered and you're unable to breathe, which causes you to suffocate and pass. Were there any signs of a struggle? Did she have any marks on her face indicating how she was asphyxiated? By hands, by an object, just signs of a struggle in general, any bruises that seem to come directly from a person, any injuries on her body, any signs that she fought back. I understand if she was in the water, a lot of that may have been washed away, or maybe bruises would have come from her body floating down the river or something like that. But any marks definitively linked to, you know, how she was murdered. It just makes me wonder. Which leads me to the next question of marks around her hand. Like, not marks around her hand, marks around her face that would maybe be shaped like a hand. So, and if they were they, you know, in the shape of a man or a woman? Maybe the FBI isn't really releasing this information because it's something that they can take to trial as evidence if they do find suspects that they can link to this case. But it just makes me wonder. It would kind of indicate whether or not it was the male or female that she was with that actually did the deed. Which, you know, maybe something to think about too with that is, like, if it was the female or if it was the male, then you have someone definitively who did the act of murdering her, but you're also then kind of given this leeway to try to appeal to the other person that they were with. So let's say it was the man. It's a man's hand that was covering Jane Doe's face. You can try to appeal to that female then. You know, maybe give out some kind of reward or something. I don't know. I don't know how you would go with that, but it just makes me wonder if there were any signs, you know, a specific hand covering her face. Signs of a fight. And then another question I have is, are there any bruises that definitively link her to being, like, thrown in the water, thrown over a bridge? I don't know anything about what kind of damage that would do to a body, but I'd assume there's some kind of specific, you know, like, you would know if a body was sitting in water, or possibly if it had been thrown from a high place into water. Was there any signs of that? And if not, does that kind of lean more towards her just kind of being left there on the side of the river? Like, they just threw her on the side of the river, not really intentionally putting her entirely into the water. Let's see. Another question I have is, do they believe she was dead long before she was put in the water? Was she immediately killed and then thrown into the water? You know, was she brought to the water's edge before being dumped on the side of the river or being thrown over a bridge or whatever it may be? Or was she killed somewhere else? Could people have maybe potentially seen a fight earlier that day or heard something that would link to a location, you know, where something could have happened to her? They saw a struggle, they saw a couple in an argument, you know, at a gas station, at the Mark Twain campground, at the Mark Twain gift shop. You know, if the witnesses said that they were in good spirits and everything, but maybe someone somewhere else in Hannibal happened to see, you know, people fighting, and they didn't even link it at all to this case. They don't remember the descriptions of the people, but they remember people fighting, struggling, you know, carrying a body, carrying like a heavy object. You know, I feel like there's a lot of little things that could really kind of link to that case if you knew if she for sure was killed at the water's edge or killed somewhere else and then brought to the water. How far was her body decomposed? I feel like they have an approximate time of death with a lot of Jane Doe cases that I see. I couldn't really find her approximate time of death, like how far in advance she had been murdered prior to being found. And if she was decomposed to the point of approximately 7 days, it kind of links her back directly to that Mark Twain gift shop as potentially a tourist coming in there. Something went wrong later in the day and something happened. It really kind of strongly syncs up that story if it's 7 days prior, approximately 7 days prior, that she was left in the water. And then that leads me to the question of, was she left along the interstate or one of the smaller roads that kind of come out from the interstate once the interstate curves away from the river? She was left along the interstate, super major road, someone potentially maybe going back down south into Missouri or some other place that they would have come from, Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas. I don't know how long or far people travel really to go to Hannibal, Missouri, but let's say the people were leaving Hannibal and going south. That kind of limits it down, you know. And they're if they're off of the interstate, you know, it's a major roadway. You see the river right there. Super convenient. You can kind of toss the body off to the side there. If it has to be one of those littler roads that you're driving off of, again, it could be kind of a convenient thing because it's coming right off the interstate. But I feel like, you know, maybe then it kind of limits it down to locals who know those roads are going to lead to the river. You get what I'm saying? So I wonder if it was the interstate that she was closest to or one of the little roads. Just more questions. So many questions. And then the last question in terms of her death and where she was found is, was it a secluded area? Was it an area where there was a lot of brush cover and trees, dim lighting, you know, where someone would not have seen Jane Doe being left there? Or was it, you know, in a busy, maybe there's lights along the road, maybe it was directly along the interstate, you know, in a place where houses were nearby. If that's the case, then it makes me wonder if she was either, you know, dumped in a spot not there on a bridge or off of a boat, or maybe just upriver and floated down, because you wouldn't want to risk leaving a body in an area like that where you could easily be seen. It also leads you to the question of, did anyone close nearby there where it was super busy see something, you know, something that they didn't think was linked to that, but might be. And the last things I'm going to talk about with you guys are just basic questions of speculation in this case. My first question is, like my biggest question, I think the question everyone has, is if Jane Doe was seen with the two unidentified individuals earlier that week and everything was fine and everything was good, clearly they were doing, you know, a leisurely activity. They were going on a paid tour of a cave. They were going to a tourist shop. It seems like they were tourists on a vacation or a trip or just a weekend outing. What happened? You know, what went wrong? If the witnesses that saw them said they were in good spirits, what changed? And, you know, what happened to lead Jane Doe to her fate? If both of the unidentified people with her were young and she was older, what could have been the reason that they were all together? I've already gone over the relatives, you know, potentially she's a relative. It just seems like, what would a 39-year-old woman be doing with two 18 to 22-year-old kids? The next thing that I kind of thought of there was there a carnival nearby? And could they have been workers? I looked up, I couldn't find any specific carnivals for that date, but just around that date. And I did find country fairs, county fairs, music festivals, and actually, I think I've been saying that it was 5 years ago. It was 2015. No, it was 2013. It was 8 years ago. So I'm sorry, this entire time I've been totally doing the wrong date. But, so I really apologize for that. It was 2013, not 5 years ago, 8 years ago. So all the times during this that I've said 5 years ago, I actually meant 8 years ago. I don't know where my head was with that, and I'm super sorry. I'm not on live, so I had no one to correct me. But yeah, I mean, there were music festivals and country fairs. It's just that time of year where there's a lot of those things going on, which makes me wonder, two younger individuals and potentially an illegal immigrant. We don't know for sure if she's an illegal immigrant, just that she's of Hispanic descent. I know just from my experience going to carnivals, I've seen that they hire illegal immigrants and just a transient population in general. It seems like the type of people who may go off for a day when their carnival's closed or in between locations and visit a local tourist shop. You know, it could be just a mismatched group of carnival workers who just happen to go to Mark Twain that day, or Mark Twain's cave that day. I don't know. It just seems like they kind of fit into that potential crowd. So maybe they're kind of a transient population. That would make sense. I don't know. But there's just so many things. Could she be a parent of the two kids, a step parent, an aunt? Like, what links her? What links her to those two younger individuals? It just seems like such an odd match of age groups, you know, unless she seemed like for sure a relative. which leads me to the last thing. The last piece of speculation I have is that maybe those two individuals weren't involved at all. You know, maybe the women at the gift shop who saw them thought that they were together because they had been talking or something, or they had taken the tour together and she was actually there alone and they were there separately from her, but they were just being friendly and polite. Or maybe the two women mistook this Jane Doe for someone else who was actually at that cave and that tourist shop. Maybe Jane Doe wasn't there at all. And that really changes this entire story if that's the case. You know, there's so many what ifs in this, so many unanswered questions, and that's really the point of this video and this discussion and my channel as a whole, is to take these cases that have so many questions and just ask the questions. We can't have answers. We can't. It's almost irresponsible to make grand speculation, to come up with theories of what could have happened. I think we've done that a little bit in this video, but to get crazy with it, it diverts from the case, it diverts from the research that you could be doing, the web sleuthing that you could be doing to really help solve it. So, I mean, really all we can do is ask questions. And that's why I'm picking these cases, is so we can just ask the questions. We can have a discussion. We can give this Jane Doe a little bit more of our time, even though she isn't offering up a lot of information at the moment. She isn't offering up a name, an identity, the identity of the people she was with. She isn't offering up a... If you guys hear like screaming, it's my child running around super loud and hyper, so I apologize for that. But it's so confusing, and so many questions and so many little rabbit holes that you could really go down if you wanted to. And I wonder how far the investigators have truly gone down those rabbit holes, and if maybe we ourselves could start going down those rabbit holes, finding answers to some of these questions, you know, really digging deep and seeing what kind of information we can get. And if you guys do find any little pieces of information, or if you happen to have been in Hannibal that day, if you have pictures or memories of something that happened that day, of even a woman who looks like Jane Doe in the background, I will leave links below for you to submit all of that information to. I'll also be leaving a link below with just my case description video, so you can watch that and then come back here and see all of the questions once again. Yeah, just I don't even know what to say about this case. It's tragic, it's sad. It's a woman who for 8 years has not had an identity, and I think all we can give her now is our time and whatever little bit of research we can. By asking these questions, we open up the opportunities for research, and I think that's one of the most important things we can do, is to put those little seeds in our mind that we can then dig into. And I will be looking into a lot of these things. I invite you guys to do the same. You guys to drop tips if you come across them. Leave comments with your questions below. And then feel free to come back next week. Monday I'll be doing another Jane or John Doe case, and I'll be doing another live discussion video where I sit down and I do this exact same thing with you guys, where I sit, I talk about the case, we ask questions, we speculate, we get our thinking caps on of all the little rabbit holes that we can begin to go down, and then we can go from there and we can do what we can. If you'd like to participate in these discussions, feel free to come back 6:30 p.m. next Tuesday. That's Central Time, 6:30 Central Time next Tuesday, to discuss another person who really deserves our attention. And for the remainder of this week until next Monday, when her next Jane or John Doe comes to the spotlight, I hope that you guys can really take time to think about this Jane Doe, to ask questions, to give her some of your thought and your curiosity, and help open up her case a little further, just by doing what this entire podcast channel, whatever you want to call it, is meant to do, and that is to simply ask the unanswered questions. Thank you for joining me tonight to ask these unanswered questions with me. I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to get the live streaming up for you guys, but I really enjoy the fact that you took the time nonetheless to sit down and hear me ask my questions. If you have any questions that you'd like to leave in the comments, I invite you guys to do so. If you have comments or answers or anything, just feel free to leave those in the comments. And of course, once again, I will leave direct links to send any kind of tips to below, so you can go ahead and help this case if you are able, if you happen to come across something in your web sleuthing or personal experience. Thank you so much for joining me this evening, you guys. I will see you next Monday with a new case, and next Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Central Time to discuss that case in the same exact manner, asking the unanswered questions next Tuesday.